So for the first time in what episode is this? This is episode 9. I think I might slightly disagree with you here, Daniel, just on this. And I'll just give it from my perspective. And I'll give it from my partner's perspective, who's a doctor as well. So I have so everyone knows this. It's no secret that my actual name is Raymond William Barron. And business-wise, everyone calls me Will Barron, and that's always been that way. For anyone who isn't aware, that is because when I started the business, I was still working at the medical device company. Everyone at the device company called me Raymond. So I started the business in Will so that people in the medical device company couldn't suss out I was starting a startup on the side and probably spending less time working in the sales job than what I should have been. So that's why I had that split. Now, I find it really valuable from my perspective to have a Facebook profile of Will Barron, of business head, business content, sharing lots of cool salesman.org and social selling show content there. But if I shared that on my personal profile, well, all my friends would unfollow me in a heartbeat because they've no interest in any of the business stuff that I do whatsoever. So I'd like to build the business audience on one side and I have the personal profile on the other. And very easily, logistically, it's Raymond William Barron on Facebook for my personal profile and then Will Barron as my professional profile. And then as a business owner, of course, then I have a business page that kind of adds to the complexity here. But I find it personally valuable for that. It stops any mixed messages. It means that when someone, if I do have a connection request, I do want to reach out to someone, I want to connect with them on social media, I will then, on Facebook, for example, they know exactly what they're getting. They know it's a salesperson. They know it's a small business owner. And so they're not getting confused of, hey, did I go to uni with this person? Maybe I should add them because they're a long lost brother or cousin. Hey, he does look a little bit like me. He's just as skinny and lanky as what I am. So it's great that we finally slightly disagreed on something. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that there's potential case studies for having that split, or are you firmly set on the fact that who you are in business is who you are out of business as well?
I think it's fair to say it would depend on the person. I think your scenario absolutely makes a lot of sense. And, you and I are both in that same boat where we started our side hustles up whilst working in full-time jobs. I built the Daily Sales as the separate brand. You created the Will Barron name and used that with the podcast. And that worked really, really well. I think, again, it will work differently for different people. The risk you have when you create either a different alias or a slightly different persona is you're then having to manage 2 brands or in a sense, 3 brands when you've got a company name as well. And for some people, and I've certainly seen the benefit of utilizing just my name and making that my brand. You look at people like Dale Dupree, Kevin Dorsey, there are a lot of sales names that are growing their brands and using it both to sell and build that kind of long-term opportunity. So I think it can work both ways. What you've got to look at is your current situation, your company, your product, your service, your current audience. My network on Facebook and the other platforms, they like to see the work stuff. I'm not pitching to them. I'm not trying to sell stuff through my content on those platforms, but sure. I'm sharing my journey. Same as LinkedIn. I'm just sharing, this is what I'm on this podcast. I've done this, my book's coming out here. It's less salesy, horrible content. It's the same stuff that's applicable across all networks. So yeah, I think you can do it both ways. What you need to do is sit and look at your circumstances and look at your plan. What do you want to achieve in the next 3, 5, 10 years? And then look at what path might help you get there.
Yep, that makes total sense. And I guess there's 2 different approaches here, right? I think it's Gary Vee who said or suggested that new content creators, and this is what he does, right? So it's not just, it's for massive people with massive audiences as well. But he focuses on documenting what's going on as opposed to creating content out of thin air. Then there's different approaches, right? A lot of the content that we publish is creating content. The social selling show is creating something new. We're not necessarily we do it within the show, but we're not necessarily documenting what's going on in our lives. So for my approach, if I was documenting more, I guess congruently, authentically, if I was sharing, the business has done this today, I've done this, we've got these interviews coming up, that might be a more appropriate personal profile versus, as I said, what we do is publish. Basically, I don't really care about Facebook. So maybe that sums up some of this. Or we just repurpose content from elsewhere on Facebook and push it out there. So that makes total sense. And salespeople probably should be documenting rather than creating from scratch, because what salespeople are doing each day, the insights that they're picking up just as they move through their careers, that's interesting to buyers in its own right. So with that, then I want to cover, if possible, depending on time, we'll cover LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Weibo. I don't know if you've come across Weibo before, but we'll touch on that. Twitter, Reddit, LinkedIn, Clubhouse, TikTok. We'll get through as many of these as we can. But are there any, after LinkedIn, is there anything we should be focusing on, Daniel? Is there any one of these social networks where you go, okay, we've got LinkedIn covered here when you're consulting, we've got LinkedIn covered, let's cover this social network next? Which one would be the one you'd follow up on?
LinkedIn, as I said, 80 to 90% of time and effort is what I encourage a lot of my customers, which obviously tend to be heavily B2B. Again, if their customers are on that platform, that's where I'll support them with. In terms of what I would use next, it'd be one of three things, or these three things together: Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Those would be the three where I'd encourage salespeople, sales teams, customers to look at, again, treating each one individually and treading carefully into how your prospects and customers are utilizing it. And what we'll talk about a bit in a minute is the newer ones like TikTok and Clubhouse, and especially Clubhouse, which is, as you say, it's got 10 million users, but it feels like there's 10 billion users with the amount of noise that's happening. So again, there could be a lot of confusion about the potential that sits within those. But yeah, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter would be where I'd put underneath LinkedIn.